Shall we play a game? Well, the only right answer to that question is a strange game. The only winning move is to not play. How about a nice game of chess? Well, this isn't global thermonuclear war, nor is it chess. I'm talking about the new Netflix horror, Choose or Die. It's kind of like War Games meets Jumanji meets Black Mirror. But is it any good? In pursuit of an unclaimed $125,000 prize, a broke college dropout decides to play an obscure 1980s survival computer game. But the game creates scenarios where she's faced with dangerous choices and reality warping challenges. This stars Asa Butterfield, Iola Evans, and Eddie Marsan, and takes place in modern day with a massive helping of nostalgia that's kind of forced on us. The concept of this 85-minute movie is great. I mean, you've got this mysterious old computer game that forces players to choose between two options, both of which are typically not awesome, even though they start out seemingly harmless. The catch is, though, that the game somehow can affect reality, bending the world to its desires. I mean, that's creepy and cool, right? Asa Butterfield plays Isaac, this loner computer programmer who enjoys all things retro. His music, his car, and the majority of his technology all date back to the 80s. His friend is Kayla, played by Iola Evans, and she's had to drop out of school to take care of her mom after a family tragedy. She works a dead-end job to make ends meet, but she's wildly talented as a programmer and as someone who can just restore old technology. Her character reminded me a tiny bit of Dan in that unfortunately canceled awesome Netflix series Archive 81. Now, Kayla accidentally stumbles upon a game in a pile of junk at Isaac's, and it has this note attached to it saying that the winner of the game will receive $125,000. So naturally, this piques her interest, and she takes the game home in order to get it ready to play. Once she boots it up, that's when a huge series of unfortunate events begin, leading to all sorts of chaos and then hurt. I like how this plays out, even though some of the effects that are shown in the movie do feel like they came out of the 80s. We'll see people glitch out, and some of it is cool looking, while other times it just feels cheaply executed. And because this is only 85 minutes long, like I said, the story doesn't waste really any time going off on tangents. But that also means that most of the development is rather thin when it comes to the characters. This isn't a problem with those we aren't supposed to like, but we don't really understand motivations for them. And then if there is a character that we are supposed to become invested in, it's a bit hard when they're pretty much a stranger to us. A fun feature of the game that also helps to move the story along quickly is that once the game has begun, each new level will start at the same time 24 hours later. So for Kayla, she starts the game at 2 a.m., meaning that the second level of the game will begin at 2 a.m. the following day. So to have this urgent time limit built into the story really helps with the pacing, but it also becomes a problem when the story forgets the rules that it set up. At one point, Isaac and Kayla need to travel someplace before the next level begins, and they state they have 10 hours left. And then apparently, after about 4 hours of traveling, they state that they only have 6 hours left before the level starts. But the problem is that it's totally daylight outside. So if the level starts every day at 2 a.m., then 6 hours prior to that is 8 p.m. Now, even if we're talking about the dead of summer in the US, which the clothing suggested that it was more of winter time, but even if it were summer, 8 p.m. is starting to be dusk, not mid-afternoon. I know this is a small nitpick, but it really bothered me that when the story has such a strict adherence to time that they can't get that little portion correct. The scenarios that the game creates for Layla to play are pretty entertaining and intense. One actually even gave me chills because of how the imagery was playing out. I think though most of the levels were stunted in their timings, so while they may be intense, that anxiety doesn't last too long, leaving us with an excited but really quick resolution. I enjoyed the lore that the story established, and even how some of it is explained because there really is a creep factor to it. It's also fairly unique, and the imagery that's used to support the lore, I think it's intriguing and then even messed up. The little bit we get on the lore of the game, though, is really fascinating, and it feels like if it were explored, it could make for another really jacked up tale. But it all comes about really quickly, and it isn't examined to the level that it really should be, meaning that the climax also arrives and resolves fairly quickly. Now, for that climax, it was crazy and fun, especially once the characters understand the rules. But the fact that it's over in a relatively short amount of time left me a bit wanting. And that's where the short runtime becomes a double-edged sword. The short time makes for a very compact storytelling experience, but in this case, some of the actual story elements are shortchanged in the process. There's a tie-in to the company that Kayla works for, the apartment where she lives, and an element of the game. And I want to know more about this because it seems like it could be tremendously important. The film even takes a brief amount of time to show us the connectivity, but the exposition and the explanation on it are fairly lacking. So overall, the concept of Choose or Die is a great one, with a creepy premise and some unsettling imagery. The compressed storytelling creates an urgency that provides a lot of anxiety, but that tension is then diminished because the story lacks the depth to build out the lore in a truly compelling way. The acting is convincing, and I enjoyed most of the ride, especially how mundane tasks can be made to be horrifying. While some of the effects are cheesy and poorly executed, other elements are very creative and enjoyable. This ends up being a total mixed bag of effectiveness for me. I liked it all right for what it was, but saw all of the potential that it was missing. Plus, at the end of it, this is a fairly forgettable movie. I mean, any creepiness evaporates as soon as the credits roll. There's no sex or nudity, but there is a lot of profanity and a bunch of violence. I give Choose or Die 2.5 out of 5 couches. Are there any horrors that you've seen recently that are worth checking out? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.